Neil Bibby to be followed by Claire Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As Neil Findlay has already said, we can share much of the Government's policy aims and objectives, but this does not mean this proposed legislation is justified or desirable. The aim of improving the education system for learners is one, of course, we support. But the question we must ask ourselves today is whether the Post-16 Reform Bill makes this more likely to happen or not. And I am not yet convinced that it does make it more likely. And I would go further because I believe that from the start to the finish, this bill in its current format has raised significant concerns that could potentially make matters worse. It has raised concerns about a lack of detail in terms of university governance and college reform, concerns because there has been a lack of meaningful consultation with institutions, trade unions, students and other stakeholders before the legislation was drafted, concerns because there are questions over whether legislation is even needed in certain areas, and there are concerns that it will not achieve better outcomes in terms of widening access and improving colleges because they are being undermined by other Scottish Government policy choices. I have not got time to concentrate on all of these points, but I will focus on three areas: university governance, college reform and widening access. I am sure we all want to improve university governance, not just now, As we know, the bill states that the institutions are to comply with any principles of governance or management which appear to constitute good practice. But as the Education Committee report states, the bill does not specify the particular principles of governance that are to be adopted. The content of the Governance Code has not been seen by the Education Committee and is not expected to be published until sometime in April. The steering group set up to draft the code has had no staff or student representation on it. I firmly believe that changes affecting university governance should be developed with staff and students if we want to get things right. We also need to listen to the concerns raised by our universities too, people like Professor von Pronzinski, whose review of higher education helped initiate this bill. His recent evidence to the Education Committee on the Code of Governance said it is not clear what particular principles of good governance might be enforced by this legislation. Moreover, the fear has arisen that the provision could be used to apply some other unspecified set of principles of good governance, or might even at some future date be used to apply the views of particular politicians or officials. He went on to I don't think I will have time to get all my points in. He went on to describe two ways of dealing with this. One was to delay the legislation, and the other was to deal with it out with a legislative framework. Neither involved voting to proceed with the bill at 5 o'clock today. And of course there have been significant concerns raised on the college reform proposed in the bill by witness after witness. Colleges Scotland, on the two-tier structure, said there does not appear to be any precedent for this model. Susan Walsh of Cardonald College said clarity is still required on how the assigned college boards will work with the regional strategic boards. Mandy Exley of Edinburgh College said we are concerned about accountability and autonomy. Again, the Scottish Government should be listening to the weight of evidence presented to the Education and Culture Committee. In terms of widening access, it is an aim that we fully support, and I am sure we all fully support. The debate is timely in that regard. It is timely because just last week, figures published showed that you have more chance of going to university if you are a pupil from a state school in England than a state school in Scotland. There are, of course, questions to be raised on university admissions policy, but there are questions to be raised on Scottish Government policy too. Tinkering on the edges is not good enough. Substantial progress will not be made on widening access unless there is substantial investment targeted at improving life chances. Pre-16 education, the lack of priority placed by this Government on preschool education, is incompatible with the widening access agenda, and the massive cuts to colleges is incompatible with widening access. In terms of the bill, as the committee report states, there was little information in the policy memorandum on levels of representation or the relative success of various initiatives. Not surprising, because the officials admitted there has only been something like a 1% improvement over the past 9 years. The policy memorandum also does not explain how the bill would improve access by the rate of improvement being sought by the Scottish Government. When challenged on this at committee, the Cabinet Secretary said he did not expect there to be an overall target set. If the Government was serious about widening access, then the Government would be serious about answering these questions. Officials even downplayed the possibility of financial penalties if universities did not meet targets, something the Cabinet Secretary has now talked up. And all of this is to be achieved without a new and additional budget. And there won't be any displacement either. Presiding Officer, if it sounds too good to be true, then it's because it probably is. And these are not just our concerns. Concerns have been raised by a number of organisations. The Open University, which was created by a Labour government in the 1960s, is an institution that probably knows more about widening access than any other organisation in the UK. Like us, they support the Scottish Government's commitment to increase the number of students from non-traditional backgrounds, but would like to see greater policy direction in this area. In closing, Presiding Officer, I can sum up my argument in 5 words. This bill is a mess. I think it's quite telling that Mike Russell has basically pleaded with members of the Education Committee to bring forward amendments at stage 2 to make the bill better. The bill is not in a fit state to proceed. The Education Committee has done its job in scrutinising the bill. The Scottish Government have not made a decent case, never made a compelling case for this legislation. Therefore, I join the consensus out with the SNP in calling for it to be delayed and reconsidered.
Thank you. Claire Adam.